Hi guys, this is John.
Hi, thanks. All right, so again, just to review, so John Wong is with Pacific Islands, and will be showing us some EM work they've been doing, so take it away.
Okay, thanks so much. Sorry for the confusion this morning. Let's see, good morning everyone. I'm not sure if you guys know the title of today's talk. It's listed above, developing a low-cost electronic monitoring system specifically for small-scale fisheries. Before I really jump into this, I want to highlight my co-authors, Mike Osmond from WWF, Wendy Dow-Piniak from Gettysburg College, and Shara Fizzler and Joel Barkin from Ocean Discovery Institute based in San Diego. And so today's talk, the real goal is to give you guys an update of our EM work, in particular in the small-scale sector, but to provide you guys with kind of an idea of how we're approaching this particular issue, and really to give you guys context of how our team is interested in using this technology. So first off, as indicated, our research group is based here at NOAA's Pacific Islands Fisheries Science Center. And we've been primarily involved in the development of a variety of technologies used to reduce bycatch in fisheries, primarily aimed at reducing sea turtle interactions with these fisheries. So we've dealt with fisheries, everything from coastal Japanese poundnet fisheries, where we've developed poundnet escape devices, to longline fisheries, where we've looked at circle hooks, offset hooks, appendage hooks. And most recently, we've been involved in coastal gillnet fisheries, where we're looking at visual cues and acoustic cues to reduce turtle interactions. And so why small-scale gillnet fisheries? And it really comes down to the fact that these fisheries are pretty much found everywhere in the world. They're globally ubiquitous. And oftentimes, they have an immense fishing effort in a very small region. A good example of this is in Indonesia, where there's an estimated 400,000 small-scale fishing vessels, 275,000 of which are gillnet vessels. Oftentimes, these gillnet fisheries are poorly regulated, poorly monitored, and as a result, they have really low selectivity, which means they interact with a huge number of turtles, seabirds, sharks, marine mammals, you name it, they'll catch it. And because these animals are typically highly migratory, it becomes a multinational issue. And ultimately, there are few bycatch reduction solutions. And so in order to test various bycatch reduction technologies, or BRTs, our team has worked predominantly in Baja California and Mexico. And a key aspect of this work is really we need to have the catch rate data. Okay, so we've got to measure catch per unit effort. And that ultimately then allows us to compare gears with and without modifications. So we can see the effectiveness on decreasing turtle bycatch, or the effectiveness on maintaining target catch rate or catch value. And so in order to get these measurements, we obviously then need onboard observers. And therein lies our problem. It's always the limiting factor in which how many observers can we actually train up and get out on these small fishing vessels in order to get this type of catch rate data. And so that's really what brought us into this electronic monitoring world. And so again, when you look at the assessment of small-scale fisheries, it's really this limited data that is a primary characteristic of many of these fisheries. All right, so not having the catch composition, not having the catch rate or bycatch rates, and ultimately it becomes very difficult then to assess the bycatch issues, and then it becomes very difficult to understand what sorts of technologies can help reduce or be useful. And so the limiting factor again is monitoring requires observers, and that's really expensive in many of these situations. It's logistically challenging because these vessels are often spread geographically apart very far. The vessel sizes are very small. Sometimes the vessels are very unsafe, so it's very then difficult to get observers on board. And so could electronic monitoring then be a potential solution? Now, electronic monitoring systems, they've been around for quite a while. They've been developed to augment observer coverage, and primarily that's been done in fisheries that are economically important and very industrialized. Unfortunately, the existing systems are also very expensive, typically over $15,000 US. And so that really puts it out of the reach of many of these small-scale fisheries, and in particular these fisheries that exist in developing countries or second-world countries. And so that's what led us then to ask, do we need then to have better tools or more economically viable tools and technologies to help assess what's going on in these small-scale fisheries? And so that's the project objective. To develop and test a low-cost electronic monitoring system that we can then use to collect catch composition data and ultimately be useful for our bycatch work. And so when you think of that, such devices then can add value to some of these extraordinarily economically strapped fisheries in that they are able to show that fishermen are using best practices, and hopefully that then would add value to the value chain. It also then gives a window into the potential of enforcing specific management regulation. And for our purposes, it helps then assess the catch and bycatch rates. And ultimately, that data can then feed into data-driven management. And also, it's an interesting exercise in understanding how low can electronic monitoring systems really cost. And so with that in mind, about a year and a half ago, we developed a collaboration with WWF USA, an engineering firm called Flywire, to see whether or not we can develop a low-cost electronic monitoring system. The aim was to make something less than about $1,000 and have it designed specifically for the needs of a small-scale fisheries. Again, the idea is, can we augment our observer coverage? And the idea is, can we get this catch composition data? And so the current EM systems that we've been able to put together utilize high-quality HD video. They're linked to a GPS. It has fairly flexible power systems. We can either tie it into the boat power. We can use rechargeable batteries up to 50 hours. And now we've got an option where we're able to run it off of solar panels. The systems utilize SD cards, so that allows us to get up to 256 gigabytes of data. They're pretty modular, meaning if you don't need GPS, you don't need to include the GPS. If you don't need certain batteries, you can remove those, so that helps with the cost flexibility. And they're pretty expandable at this stage, meaning we can daisy link several of these units together to put 2, 3, or 4 units onto a vessel to get multiple points of view. And the idea is we can also expand its utility down the road by having hydraulic sensors or RFID sensors that can also be inputted into the system. And so what it comes down to is, at least in Mexico, we've been comparing the data flow coming out of onboard observers with the data flow that come out of electronic monitoring systems. And that allows us then to develop the necessary processing for the video side of things. And so this particular slide just gives you an idea of the catch rate comparisons that we're making. And so if you look at the catch table, what we're looking at then is just a list of target catch species out of this fishery, the number that come via the onboard observer and the number that come via the EM system. The graph on the left-hand side shows the number of target species over 32 trips. We're basically getting the same catch rate information. That then says to us the EM system data flow is, in essence, comparable to onboard. What's interesting is the data collection time. And so what this shows is the amount of time savings that we have when we use electronic monitoring, which translates then to the amount savings for the number of people we need to utilize for this. And what we see is there's about a 34% time savings when you look at what the onboard observer is doing. And so this is basically simply the time in which the onboard observer is taking data. So this is basically the haulback time on the GillNet vessel versus the time it takes for the scoring to be done on the video. But if you include transit time, and that's typically at least an hour to and an hour return from the fishing site, then what you see is an expansion in that time savings up to about 75% time savings. And you'll see that 75% number later on again. And so some of the basic lessons learned that we have coming out of this is that obviously EM can help augment our observer coverage. You still need to have an observer program. The EM is another data flow that plugs into it. Not only can it provide target catch data, but it also starts to provide bycatch data, the discard data, because we can clearly see when fishermen throw things overboard. Some cons are it really does require a huge amount of data management. We're already managing our observer data flow, but having this parallel data flow is pretty significant. And a big part of that, again, is the file sizes, and that's something that we're working on with the vendor to really optimize video resolution. The other aspect is we need to work with fishermen. Part of that is in order for us to maximize where the point of view is on the fishing vessels, we really need to understand the workflow on that particular vessel. And so that obviously requires significant cooperation with fishermen, which is a great thing because then it allows us to continue with our collaborative relationships that we've developed over the last several years with these guys. And so the different projects that we've now initiated that incorporate these EM systems are, again, in Mexico, where we're continuing to test the newest electronic monitoring systems. So these have different hardware upgrades. For example, the solar panels, there's been a lot of hardening of the equipment to make it more robust. This year, we'll have the first set of software that actually allows us to combine the video data flow with the GPS data flow into one place, and it helps with the scoring process. So we're looking forward to giving that a go. In about 2 weeks, I'll be down in Mexico with the new systems and the new software to see how that flows. And for the first time, we feel that the equipment is robust enough to actually now incorporate into our bycatch reduction technology gear trials. So we'll be outfitting 4 vessels with this, and those 4 vessels are participating in our gear trials. So we feel comfortable enough that the data flow that we're getting out of this system is robust enough to actually participate in those trials. We're also working in Indonesia in several gillnet fisheries in Borneo. And so right now, what we're doing is we're deploying at least 2 of these units onto the gillnet fisheries to help characterize sea turtle bycatch. In Indonesia, what we've been doing are rapid assessments throughout the archipelago to understand the potential turtle and other bycatch interaction rates with fisheries. To follow up with those interviews, we develop onboard observer programs, and we're only able to get a few observers out on these vessels to get kind of quantifiable data. And so the hope is then to utilize these camera systems to help increase our observer coverage. And in addition, we're also using these camera systems to help us with our bycatch trials, where we're testing net illumination as a potential tool to reduce bycatch in these fisheries. And lastly, we just initiated a project in the Hawaii bottomfish fishery. What it does is it provides us with a local testing platform to try out new EM devices as they come through the pipe. It gives us a chance to play with them, to figure out what's working, what's not, so that we can kind of provide feedback to the development company. In addition, we're trying to now develop a methodology to better characterize the effort of fishing effort as well as the catch rate in this particular fishery. So I've got 3 initial tables here. We've got about 15 observed trips right now. The first 5 we just finished scoring, and that's giving us an idea of what sorts of data that we want to pick out of the video stream. And what the first table is really giving you is just our understanding of what the fishing effort. You know, you can look at the total trip time, you can look at the number of drops, you can look at total soak time, etc. That's ultimately going to feed into our ability to understand unit effort. The second graph down on the bottom left is really just characterizing catch. It shows that with the video, we're able to differentiate between many of the primary species caught in this particular fishery. And then the right-hand bottom chart starts to help us understand that efficacy putting an observer on board versus just scoring the data. And what you see is over the first 5 trials, we're getting time savings of over 75%. So right around 75%, again, is kind of that cost savings of what it would take to put an observer on the vessel for the entire time versus just scoring through the video and able to get that information. So it really seems to us that there's a ratio of about 1 to 4, meaning one video scorer can then go through and get the data of catch composition, catch rate that 4 observers would take to get. And so some takeaways from this today is really these low-cost electronic monitoring systems, really, they've improved over the last year and a half that we've been involved in this project. I mean, up to just 2015 and July, we really just didn't think about starting this project. And it's been a year and a half. We've gone through about 4 different evolutions of the equipment, and we've really seen the equipment evolve in a way that we're now beginning to feel very comfortable in utilizing it as part of our tool set. We've got deployments in 3 fisheries, the Baja California bottom-set gillnet fisheries, the Borneo drift gillnet fisheries, and a bottom-fish fisheries here in Oahu. So that gives us 3 different platforms to test this equipment and to see where it should go. And ultimately, the main takeaway is, while these electronic monitoring systems produce really high-quality video, converting that video to usable fisheries data is what's key. And I think that obviously everyone understands that. And so for us, we're always trying to do better at developing the necessary data processing system to really have that in place. And so we're looking forward to this first software design to help us do the scoring and to get that data from video to actual numbers. And so with that, I think I've got a few minutes for questions or comments or just whatever people want to talk about. But I do want to acknowledge our funders. We've got quite a few funders, but most of all, I just want to thank the fishers that have been participating in this project. So the fishing community in Punta Abrejos and Bahia de Los Angeles in Baja California, as well as the fishers down in Palau and West Kalimantan, Borneo. So with that, thanks so much.
Well, so I'll just ask. I think that's the best way to do it. So we were here at Alaska Center wondering, when you talk about that time savings, how that compares apples to apples in terms of what the observers would be collecting, because I know at our center, observers collect all kinds of other biological data and information that we, wouldn't get from a system like this. So can you just describe how that?
Yeah, I think it's really important to realize, again, electronic monitoring does not replace an observer, right? So the observer, as you put out, is able to get far more data and 4 different types of data. So when you talk about biological sampling, if that's critical to the goal of your project, then absolutely, electronic monitoring would not be appropriate. What EM does is simply provide a data stream where you can get catch rate information. And if that's sufficient for your needs, then go with that. When I'm simply doing the comparisons, what I'm trying to get a better sense of for myself is really managing the number of staff that we have in doing this work. So the question is really, what are your cost savings when you compare an onboard observer versus a data stream derived from electronic monitoring? And so what it comes down to me is I can have one person then manage 4 vessels versus having 4 people go out. And that's where I see the cost savings for me.
But it's ignoring the quantity. It's ignoring the quality and difference between the 2 data sets. Is that true? Well,
So I didn't quite catch that because of the background noise. I heard something about ignoring.
The question is, so if you're looking strictly at a efficiency, you're obviously going to get a higher rate of video review than you are observer coverage. But that's a quantitative variance, but it totally ignores the qualitative differences. And have you tried to be able to determine what the impact is? Probably not, because it's pretty small scale testing. What the impact is on a fishery with the data loss that you're not getting from observers?
Well, I think one of the key aspects here is when you talk about data loss, that's a really interesting aspect, especially when you think of how many of these small-scale fisheries simply have no data streams. And so I think what's valuable with the system is now you open a door where you actually have a tool in which you can actually get data streams out of previously black boxes. So when we talk about this and when we present these ideas to places like in Mexico or in Indonesia or Peru or in the Philippines, to their fisheries management offices, they're excited because part of it is it's extraordinarily expensive to have onboard observers, especially for these very small, very artisanal level fisheries. So there is no data from those fisheries. This then allows them to start getting some of the catch rate data that they want in order to better manage those fisheries. So therein lies, my primary answer to that qualitative aspect. Many of these fisheries just don't have this type of data.
Hey, John, this is John McVeigh at Northwest, and you may have said this in your presentation, but I just have a question about the software aspect. Did I hear correctly, right now you're using the Archipelago Marine Research software, but that Flywire is developing software for their video, or is that something that your shop is doing?
Flywire is developing the software, so we've seen hints and pieces of it up to this point. I know in other projects that the data stream is slated to go through other types of software. What we've simply done is we're simply looking at the data stream using off-the-shelf video players and then plugging it directly into our pre-existing data management plans that we already have for our onboard observers. So it's extraordinarily cumbersome, and this is why we're pretty excited about having at least any sort of kind of data management or software support.
How much have you had to work with individual fishers as far as catch handling and things like that go? Other EM projects I've seen have very detailed vessel monitoring plans that are, I don't want to say cumbersome, they're necessary, but it's a lot of work. Have you had to use that type of approach in these smaller fisheries that you've worked in?
Sure. I think one advantage that we have is because the vessels are so small, the actual square footage is extraordinarily constrained. And so a big part of what we do is we work with the fishermen and we sit there and just observe the fishermen for several different trips to understand what area are they actually utilizing. And through that, we're collaboratively working out where best to put the camera so that it's, one, not interfering with their operations, but two, is able to actually get points of view in which it's really providing the best possible screen grabs for what's going on the deck. And so I think, again, that is the value of these systems where you do need to collaborate with your fishermen in order to get the best data. It's not something that you can put on a vessel and basically expect not to be working with fishermen. I mean, that's something that maybe that's an extension really coming out of our bycatch work where we're constantly in communication with fishermen. We're intimately involved in how they fish and working with them on fishing vessels.
Thanks, and last questions and then I'll shut up. As far as tamper-resistant, tamper-proof, tamper-evident, does Flywire have any of those sort of mechanisms on the units?
I think the most recent system has a lockable access panel. But I mean, the reality is if the fisherman wants to fiddle with the camera systems, they can. I mean, the video is on, you have the main body, and then you have a video line that attaches to the camera itself, and that's about 6 feet long. If you want to cut that, slice that, by all means, they can slice that. What's been interesting to us is we've now, regularly deployed this on at least 6 vessels in Mexico. I've been rotating through about 8 boats in Borneo, in the vessel here in Oahu, and maybe it's just the approach we have and kind of the different culture that we're working in. We've never had an issue. We've never had an issue with the fishermen saying no. The first series of camera systems we had a kill switch because we just wanted to make sure the fishermen felt comfortable with the video systems. Not one time, did we ever have a fisherman, turn off the system. I think it ultimately is probably more attributable to the difference in cultures between the places we work in and perhaps U.S. fisheries.
Thanks a lot, John. Thanks for sharing your work.
Thanks.
Hey, John, this is Brett Elger down at headquarters. I have 2 quick questions. The first one is, what's your typical data turnaround from, landing to review video and feedback back to the captain?
Sure. So during in Mexico, our process is about 2 days. We can do it under 1 day. It's just we're doing a lot of other things simultaneously. And so it gives us then a day and a half is our goal. And then typically by the end of the second evening, we do have a feedback route system where we're talking to the fishermen and the core team to say, did that camera system work? What was wrong with the field of view, et cetera.
And so is the video, forgive me, is it on a hard drive and somebody's there, or it's on those SD cards? Is it somebody there then locally loading it, watching it, or is it can't be being mailed or shipped anywhere, correct?
No, it is actually being pulled off the vessel when the vessels come back with a new drive put in, and then that SD card is taken and the data's gone through at that point.
Okay, cool, thank you. And the second question is, you captured soak time on gill nets. Are these boats setting one net and retrieving one net at a time, or do they set multiple nets?
So in Baja, they set a single net. That net typically can be anywhere between 400 meters to 1,500 meters, depending on how much net a particular fisherman wants to set that day. And so we're able to get a GPS start set and end set, and that kind of gives us an estimate of the length of the net, which goes into our unit effort calculations.
Okay. I've been approached by a number of folks in different fisheries that are wanting to start using EM to calculate soak time, but the challenge is if in the fishery they set, say 5 nets, and then half a day later they start retrieving those nets, it's hard to associate the retrieval of a given net with the setting of that net through EM. So, you would have to create like some way of tagging, A to A and B to B and C to C. But, okay.
Yeah, so that actually, that's one of the things that is on my list of things that I'd like to see get developed in the next year or two, is having some way to have, for example, an RFID tag on a gill net, and with a sensor that's built into the EM that triggers when a particular net is thrown overboard or retrieved back onto board. And I think that helps, again, very easily with identifying a particular section of a net, but also helps then also with defining time in water, time out of water. So those questions.
Cool. Thank you.
Hey, John, this is Lee Beneco with the National Observer Program. Great talk, as usual. I was wondering, have there been any other U.S. fisheries that have expressed interest in this technology for, the small boats? I'm thinking particularly the Southeast or the Caribbean that have never had observer programs, will probably never have human observers, but we've got kind of a black hole or black box regarding what's going on and what's being discarded.
So really, two that come to mind. I think there have been some West Coast fisheries based out of Half Moon Bay that have expressed interest in, preliminarily testing the systems. I know that this upcoming summer, we're working with Larissa Avens at the Beaufort Labs to get these camera systems on the Pownet fisheries in Pamlico Sound. And so that would then give us another fishing gear type to analyze and better understand how best to kind of get unit effort and catch data and things like that. So kind of looking forward to that summer. Winnie Dow PNIAC is the primary driver behind that particular project.
Oh, that's great. And do you envision more field research on this topic in Mexico summer of 2018?
That's all funding dependent.
Oh.
So, we would love to, again, the platform that we've developed in Baja California is a great platform for us to test new ideas. It's really become our test bed for these things.
Great, thanks.
Hi, John. This is Farron Wallace, Alaska Fisheries Science Center, and I have sort of a linked question here. One is, have you been able to evaluate how good your species composition data are on these vessels? And then also, if you're going to estimate bycatch discard, where are you getting the weight from?
Sure. A couple things on that. The species composition data, right now, hopefully with this last summer in Baja, we'll be able to pump out enough sample size where we have a better grip on getting the species composition data from the video. We're also doing that for the bottomfish fisheries here in Hawaii. With regards to discard, we're not measuring, obviously, weight. Down the road, what we can do is develop a methodology to get length data. A lot of that is going to be in a low-cost manner where if we just simply have a mat with a grid, the fishermen are able to pass the fish through the grid, then we can pause, get a length. Then using length weight curves that are already established, we can then come out with a weight. But that's way down the road right now. Right now, we're just simply counting what's being thrown overboard and what's not.
Any more questions for John?
Okay.
Yep.
If you guys have any questions, you're more than welcome to shoot me an email offline and give me a call. Okay?
Thanks, John.
All right. Well, thank you again. That was very informative.